Welcome to Quilter's Architect. My name is Mark, and in this video I'm continuing the work I started on the pop beads quilt. In the last video I went over the quilt pattern, talked about the inspiration, shared some of my cat stories, and also did the cutting of the fabric and talked about the fabric requirements. In this video I'm going to actually start making the blocks, and I have four variations on the blocks. There are two blocks in this quilt, the diversional spool block, and there's also the snowball block. And so as you'll notice looking at the quilt pattern, I have one that has like the white background with the gray corners or silver corners of the snowball. And then the other variation of the snowball block is this, it's like a greenish color with a lagoon color on the corners. And then for the diversional spool block, I have this wine and magenta with the middle and the bottom and top of the block, and then gray on the sides. The other variation on the diversional spool block has a charcoal center, a smoke color of fabric on the top and bottom, and silver on both sides. So what I plan to do is move on to demonstrating making each of these blocks. The diversional spool block starts on page 3 and it's also on page 4. I would consider the fabric combination on page 4 a little bit more fun. In my case, I'm using the Tula pink fabrics. This is the fabric that's going to be my center square of the block. And then this is the top and bottom of the block. And then of course the silver is on the corners and the sides of the block. So I'm going to start with that one for the diversional spool block because the other one is charcoal, smoke, and silver. And although it's all going to look really nice together, I thought this would be a nice one to start with as far as kind of like the visual appeal of these fabrics together. Looking at the instructions on page 4, you'll notice that one of the first things it tells us we need to do, and I've already done this, I just sat and took all of these pieces and I drew a line from corner to corner. And this way, when we do our stitch and flip, we can just lay that on our fabric and we can sew directly on that pencil line. And you'll notice that it says here in step 2, using fabric pieces O and D, make 40 stitch and flip rectangles. We're to sew on the line that was drawn from corner to corner and then cut a 1/4 inch away from the seam on the side towards the corner, and we can press our seam afterwards. This suggests pressing the seam towards the corner. I'm also going to show you another tool that I'm using now for pressing seams, and then we'll be able to use these stitch and flip rectangles along with the middle unit to form the entire block. So let's get started by putting on our stitch and flip corners on one of the rectangles. In my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin these because looking at the stitch and flip, I think there's a little bit of a tendency for it to move around, to wiggle around on you a little bit when you're stitching these. And so I had planned to pin them. Try to avoid that a little bit because, as we know, it's going to distort the rectangle after we stitch and flip. And we don't want it to be distorted too much, right? Because then once we finish the block, our square won't end up being 9.5 inches. It'll be some other dimension or it'll be twisted. It's not to say that we can't have any of that still. It's just that if we get these pinned, probably I think we'll have a better outcome. I'm just going to set these stitch and flips aside for a moment. Looking at our instructions again on page 4 in figure A2, we're joining fabric pieces E and P to make the middle unit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I can just press all my seams afterwards before I join the 3 units to form the block. For the units that we're forming with the flip and stitch, we have to cut off the outside corner, right? So thinking of what it's going to look like this, we need to cut off the excess beyond the seam. It's funny how much difference it makes turning a ruler around. Like if it has a black line or a white line for the 1/4 inch from the edge, depending on what color fabric you're working with, right? It's like I had the white line over here trying to line up on this silver fabric and light thread and barely could distinguish it actually. Of course, my light, as I mentioned before, I need to add another light over here, I think. For me, it still seems a little dark just in this area of where I'm working at. What I wanted to show you before I press these seams open is one of Sherry's viewers sent us a gift, and it's this. And this is for pressing open seams. You can see it's shaped like it's like a half circle, and it's a bar. It's covered with wool. It's a wooden bar covered with wool. This is made by Maywood Studio, and it's called a seams flat pressing bar. I'm not sure if the company is New Zealand Wool or it's Maywood Studio. One of those two. It says it's all natural. It says step 1 is place the seams flat pressing bar on a wool ironing mat, and step 2 is to lay the fabric seams side up and press. So I'm not sure. Like, I'm torn on what it says about using a mat underneath of it. I have a wool mat here, right? But I don't know if that's to absorb the heat from that bar. I'm not quite sure why they want you to put a mat under this bar. It seems like the wood bar itself would be thick enough to absorb the heat. I didn't do it the first time I used it, but I wanted to show you kind of what this is like. Maybe the idea is you're supposed to be able to do this without having to spread this fabric apart, but I find myself still wanting to press this fabric apart before I try to press it. But let's give it a go here and see how it does. One thing that does seem nice about this is the fact that the fabric is, you're not on a flat surface, but you have that curve. It seems to help the seam stay open, you know, as you're pressing it. It seems to do pretty good. Maybe there's a trick to getting this started, and then you don't have to go down through here and separate this fabric or open this fabric up, but I kind of think you might still have to do that. I don't know. It's kind of weird, the pressing part being on a curve. But it does seem to work well. We get a nice flat outcome after we press it. And so let's see how that does. In our quilt pattern, it tells us to press these to the corner, but kind of like a flying geese, like you would think of pressing them like this. And that can certainly be done. I'm going to see how this does if I do these using this bar instead of... Now it's faster to press them over towards the corner, in my opinion. I'm sure you'd agree. It's much faster just to press them to the side. A lot less time, you know, fiddling with pressing the fabric open and all that. But if you're into the block being flatter, it might be something that actually works out pretty good. Guess I should be careful when I'm pressing that fabric apart about pressing too hard. Being on the bias like that, it might stretch, I guess. A lot of times when you press the way you do like flying geese towards the corner without opening the seams, you have kind of like a little bulge here, it seems like, and you don't see that. I think I kind of like that. So now that we have that done, we will put our units together to form our block. Okay, so I didn't starch it and square it yet, but there you can see our first block using the Tula pink fabric. It's kind of a cool combination, I think. So time to move on and do another block. Let's take a look at the next one. On page 5, we have instructions for making one of the fabric combinations of snowball blocks. And in my case, you'll notice I'll show you the fabric here. Again, I showed this in the first video, but here's a Tula pink fabric that has the cats in it. And then this is what I'm going to have for my flip and stitch on the corners. And so let's get this ready. I'm going to pin these as well. It'd be easy to turn this line around, but you know, we're trying to have this fabric on the corner, right? So we want to make sure that our corner to corner line is like this, where we're kind of cutting off the corner with it. Okay, so I have it all pinned up. I'm just going to sew off 4 of those, and then we'll finish that block as far as the cutting and pressing. Again, here, as the instructions say, you know, I had already done that with my pieces for the corner. I had already drawn a line corner to corner, and then we stitch and flip pieces K and L together as illustrated in figure A3. Again, we're sewing on the line directly from corner to corner. Once we get that sewn, we'll cut a 1/4 inch on the outside towards the corner, and then we'll have to press our seam. And this suggests to press the seam open. You can certainly follow that if you wish. I'm just trying out this new press bar and see how that turns out for me. And again, when we're cutting, we can just be careful to think about, we don't want to cut the wrong side of our seam, right? So we're thinking about the outcome we're looking for, which is like that. So we're cutting on the outside of our seam. My Martelli cutter seems to be on the other side somewhere. Probably would be easier sitting down using that one, but I'll be lazy and just use this one I have right here. Okay, so there's our snowball block using the Tula pink combination of the cats and the striped fabric on the corners. Looks pretty nice. Okay, so now I'm going to look at the other variation of fabric on the diversional spool block. And if we look at page 3, here we have charcoal, smoke, and silver. We're using fabric pieces D and A to make our flip and stitch rectangles. And then we're joining fabric pieces E and H to make the center unit. Okay, so what I see about this after joining the top and bottom units is, it's interesting as this 45-degree combination to this seam is coming into the point or the corner of the square. It's easy for that to get off slightly. Even if the fabric on the edges is fairly well lined up, it's that slight fussing to get that seam to line up. I'll pay closer attention to those. It's kind of one of those things where you have to, you know, fold back and see where's the 1/4 inch going to end up lining up with the two fabrics. So off a little bit. I guess it depends on how perfectionist someone is. They could rip it apart and try to get it perfectly lined up, but that's something I'll watch closer on the next diversional spool blocks. Okay, so time to move on to the last combination of fabrics for the snowball block, and basically it's white and silver. So here are my white 9.5 inch squares and my silver squares for the corners, and I'm going to go ahead and proceed to make this snowball block just like I did the other one. So again, just looking at our instructions, we're using fabric pieces F and Q. Q is the large white square, F is the corner silver square. Okay, so there is my white and silver snowball block. To finish off these 4 blocks that I made of each of the fabric combinations, I'm going to starch them so that when I do my squaring, they will be already nice and flat, and we won't be trying to square a block that has wrinkles, because as you know, if we have wrinkles, we may not really get a very good squared block. It definitely produces a better outcome. Now that might be a reason to press the seams towards the corner and not press them open. This white fabric is it's almost transparent, it looks like, and you can see the white seam pressed behind it. So if it was pressed towards the dark side, we wouldn't be seeing that double fabric, I think. I guess once you put batting and a backing, that probably likely won't show up, but that's something I'm gonna double check on. But looking at here, it's on top of this wool mat, ironing mat, right? You can definitely see the white, the brighter white, because it's double. So that might show up that way. Might cause me to press all those that are white and gray snowballs to the corner. Okay, so I'm just taking the glow ruler and squaring these up. And again, as our instructions say, for the snowball blocks, the unfinished size is 9.5. With only these 4 blocks, I can't really get a good representation of what the quilt will look like overall, right? Because the blocks are organized in rows this way, going down the quilt. But what I did is I just laid them in a sequence of how one of the rows is going across. And so it gives us a little bit of an idea, a sneak peek of what the quilt's going to look like with these Tula pink fabrics and these charcoal, smoke, and gray and white fabrics. One thing I think that I'm probably going to do for the remainder of the blocks I'm going to make is I am going to press the stitch and flip corners. I think I'm going to press them towards the corner, kind of like we do with flying geese. I think it's very possible that a person could distort the corners of the stitch and flips by pressing them open. I was a little concerned about that. I'm not really 100% sure if that's likely, but I think seeing my results here with the first set of blocks, I'm going to try that on the next blocks I make, which I'm going to go off camera and I'll make all the blocks of the quilt. And then my next video, I'm going to assemble all of these blocks together into rows to form the entire quilt top along with the borders. So I hope you're enjoying this so long about the pop beads quilt pattern. I hope you will join me and actually make this quilt. I hope you will share your comments about how the fabrics are coming together as we assemble the blocks. And then once they start getting into rolls, we're really going to get an idea of the visual appearance of this quilt pattern with these fabrics. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a thumbs up. And also, if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you enjoy sew-alongs and receiving free quilt patterns, I encourage you to also subscribe. In the meantime, I'm wishing you happy sewing and beautiful finishes.